The Wild Swans. In a faraway land, there lived a king. He had 11 sons and one daughter named Alyssa. His 12 children were clever and adorable. They were a happy, loving family. A few years later, the king married an evil queen. She treated the children terribly. She especially despised Alyssa, who was the youngest of the children. One day, the king took the princes hunting. The new queen took advantage of the opportunity to send Alyssa off to a farmer's house in the country. When the princes returned, she used witchcraft to turn them into 11 wild swans. The wild swans made a strange noise and flew out the palace window and headed for the forest. As they flew over the farmer's house, they had no idea that Alyssa was there. So they didn't stop, but continued toward the sea. Alyssa was getting bigger and bigger, prettier and prettier. She was as beautiful as a morning rose covered in dew, but she still missed her brothers very much. One day, she met a kind fairy by the stream. The fairy told Alyssa that her brothers had become wild swans and that they had flown to the seaside. Alyssa was determined to find her brothers. Alyssa traveled day and night until she finally arrived at the seaside. When the sun set, the wild swans would change into 11 handsome princes. They were Alyssa's brothers. However, during the day, they would change back into wild swans. They became princes only after sunset. During the night, the princes made a sturdy net of reeds for Alyssa to sit on. The next day, after the sunrise, the princes turned back into wild swans. They would pick up the net with their beaks and carry Alyssa as they flew over the big open sea. Alyssa and her brothers set up a beautiful home in the forest. Then, one night, Alyssa had a dream about the kind fairy. The fairy told Alyssa that if she made a shirt of nettles for each of the princes to wear, the curse would be lifted. But until then, she was not allowed to speak, or else the princes would die. The next day, after Alyssa's brothers turned into wild swans and flew away, there was a trumpet blast in the forest. A group of knights hunting in the forest came before Alyssa. The bravest of them was the king of that land. The king liked the silent, beautiful Alyssa. The king not only brought Alyssa back to his palace, but also prepared a pretty bedroom for her. The king's uncle didn't like Alyssa, who was always carrying nettles. He thought Alyssa was a witch and had cast a spell on the king. Alyssa began to fall in love with the gentle, caring king, but she still could not speak. Every day she would constantly make shirts. When she finished the 7th shirt, she ran out of nettles. Behind the palace was a dark, scary forest where many nettles grew. Alyssa bravely went into the forest to collect nettles. However, the king's uncle was watching. It was said that only witches dare to enter the forest at night. So he was even more certain that Alyssa was a witch. The king's uncle told the king what he saw. From that time on, the king could not sleep well. He just couldn't believe that his beloved maiden was a scary witch. But his uncle never lied. Just as she was about to finish the final shirt, she ran out of nettles again. Alyssa once again ventured into the forest to collect nettles. The king followed Alyssa and saw her enter the forest with his own eyes. The king finally believed that she was a witch. He wiped away his tears and commanded the guard to throw Alyssa in jail. The king ordered for Alyssa to be executed in 3 days. However, Alyssa was not afraid. She continued day and night to make the shirts. 3 days quickly passed. The guard brought Alyssa to the place to be executed. Just then, Alyssa finished making the last shirt. She quickly threw the shirts into the air. In an instant, the wild swans put on the shirts and turned into 11 handsome princes. Alyssa could finally speak. She told the king what had really happened. When she finished speaking, roses sprouted out of the ground. The king asked her to be his bride. With the blessing of her brothers, Alyssa and the king were married as husband and wife. They all lived happily ever after.